Welcome back to my animal education series. Today I'm here with Lindsay at the Kansas City Zoo. Hello.
Hi.
And what do we have here?
We have Panamanian golden frogs.
So where can you find these Panamanian golden frogs? I'm going to assume Panama.
You would be correct. Only in Panama. These guys, there's two different species. This species right here would be found in the cloud forest up in Panama.
And what exactly does the cloud forest mean?
So it would be up higher up in the mountains. It would be kind of near a stream because they do like water, especially for breeding. And it would be very humid, nice and humid, nice clear water, cool temperatures. So a little difficult to replicate in Kansas City sometimes.
So, as a fellow herp keeper, these are pretty well done enclosures. So how did you make all those work out to help fit their needs?
So some of my staff actually built this whole tank process here, and it did take a lot of planning. It wasn't as difficult as it seems, but we do have 4 tanks that all run on the same system. We have water filtering in from the top, kind of as a waterfall, because that's one of the requirements for their breeding, is they breed along moving water. So we have to keep a constant flow for breeding season to actually happen. And then all the water drains out the bottom of each of the tanks, drains down into our sump pump, where we have different types of filtration pads and bioballs to help get any extra stuff out. Then we have it pumped into a chiller, because the other tricky thing is they like nice cool water. We get to keep the water between 68 and 72, which again,
that's not very big.
Yeah, not a lot of room for leeway. The frogs themselves are fine in that water, but their eggs are not. So if it gets too cold, the eggs won't develop. If it gets too hot, it'll kill the eggs. So we have a big chiller that all the water runs through, so we can keep that air nice and, or the water nice and cool.
I see the big elaborate kind of design here on the board. You guys probably won't see that because that's where the cameraman is and we're not in a very big room, but it looks really well thought out.
Yeah, it's much easier to think about what you're doing, and then you kind of look into costs and then looking into reality, and so it's not quite what we wanted, but for the most part, we love the system. This will be the frog's first breeding season in this system, so we're pretty excited. So these, the Panamanian frogs, much like a lot of amphibian species, they were dying because of the chytrid disease, the chytrid fungus, which is a disease that affects their epidermis. Their skin's not allowed to breathe and absorb it correctly, and so it kills the adults that way. And then with tadpoles, it affects their mouth, so they can't even eat as a tadpole, so it kills off the young.
And you kind of need to eat to live.
Yes, you do. It's very important. And then one of the other things that affects these guys is in Panama, they're really revered, much like the bald eagle is to us. So a lot of people, what kind of helped also remove them from the wild is they would take them from the wild and have them in their house or their hotel as a good luck charm. And so again, you know, just like with lots of other animals, don't take from the wild. That's hurting these frogs as well.
They are beautiful, but they need to be out there.
Yeah, they do. So right now what we're doing and what other zoos are doing is we are trying to keep the species going. There's different levels for the breeding program with these guys. There's different phases. And so our phase is pretty much just a practice phase. So we are learning how to take care of them. We're learning how to breed them. And the hope is someday, right now there's no program to release them back into the wild, so we're just working on keeping them going, keeping their genetics diverse, for the hope that someday they will say, hey, we're ready, we're available, chytrid is not decimating everyone, so we can bring them back. I mean, that's the goal, that's the dream, is to get these guys back in the wild.
And you were mentioning before we started filming that it's still out there, so there's really no point in putting them back. But yes, we want them back out there, but they're just going to die at the same cost as them in the first place.
Currently, yes, because it's not really easy to get rid of chytrid. It's in water, it's in soil, it's there. So,
it's just a big mess.
It is, yeah. So, and sadly with amphibians, they're super sensitive, and so they kind of let us know, hey, the environment's not doing well because we're not doing well.
Like most amphibians are environmental indicators, and that's what they're indicating.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Yeah, there's bad
And unfortunately, it was with the species, with this case at least, that there's not a whole lot left.
Yeah.
So what's the whole like breeding process here? Because you were explaining you have 3 males here and the females are on an exhibit. So how do you want to build paperwork for that and kind of figure out who goes with who and when?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do with these guys, if we're checking on them constantly. We weigh them every 2 weeks just to make sure their weight's, obviously to keep them healthy, make sure they're not getting too skinny. Just like humans, you don't want to be too skinny, you also don't want to be too fat. One of the things we do with our females when we weigh them is we check the amount of eggs that they have, and it's called gravidity. And with Panamanian golden frogs, the females always have some amount of eggs, and so there's a scale from 1 to 5. And what the SSP, the Species Survival Plan, recommends, if your frog or when your frog is at a 4 or 5, that is when you'd want to introduce them to a male. Anything below that, it's not really worth your time. There's not really a good chance that you'd have success. These guys do have a breeding season, which is November and December. And so what we do is, come November, we will introduce whichever 2 females seem the most ready, have a really good weight, have a good amount of eggs. We'll introduce them to each to a male. And we have had 2 seasons where we kind of check to make sure everyone likes each other. Because the other tricky thing is, frogs, just like other animals, just because you put them together doesn't mean they want to breed and make offspring. Frogs are the same way. So frogs will go into amplexus when they're ready to breed, and that's when the male gets on top of the female and holds on to her. And so that could happen as soon as we put them in. It might also take 2 months.
Wow.
So there's a lot of variation. So with some of ours, they've done it immediately, but it still doesn't mean that they're going to lay eggs immediately. So a lot of times we're having to watch. The whole time they're in amplexus, they're not eating. So we also have to watch them to make sure we don't want them to starve to death, going a month or 2 months without eating.
It's a long time.
Yeah, and the animals are going to get really weak because the female is moving around this tank while the male's holding on to her, and you're not eating. Like, that's a lot of extra weight on your back. So there's a lot of, assessing and making sure the frogs are doing okay. Last year, when we were kind of testing everything out before we had this system, we did have 2 sets lay eggs. They just didn't end up being viable. But it's tricky because these guys like to lay like in a cave or kind of under a rock that might have a cave, because the eggs need to be somewhere where it is totally dark. And so they're also really sensitive, so you don't want to just move rocks because then you might squish the eggs.
Yeah.
So it's really tricky in the way you design the tank, because you want to design the tank in a way that you could tell if there's eggs there without having to move things around as much. So the
Seems very stressful.
It can be. I mean, it's fun because it's like, let's see what happened today, but at the same time, there's a lot that could go wrong. So the frogs, like if they decided to lay eggs, should, be gone, go under the cave, come out, and should separate. And so that would be our indicator. If we came back in one day and we noticed that the frogs had separated, we removed the adults from the tank, we would turn off the lights, and then with an infrared light, so we're not, just in case there's eggs, we would check to see what's in there, and then we just make sure, we would check to see how they would develop. So we only made it pretty much to they laid eggs, and then they didn't make it past a week, but we were excited even about that, and that was in our old system.
It's progress.
It is. So every little bit, this is, again, technically our first time trying in these tanks, but our 2nd season, so we know a little bit more, but every single time you'll learn more, and that's the point.
So one last question. What has been your favorite part about taking care and breeding these frogs?
My favorite.
It's a hard question.
It is. My favorite part is starting in this career. Amphibians weren't my favorite thing. Like, I never thought I would work with frogs and toads. So it's really been fun just getting to know these guys. And They do have little quirks, and even though they may not be as personable as, say, an ape or a monkey, it's fun to watch them and see what they're doing. And it's also very challenging. Like, we have to make their environment in the wild here, and that's not easy to do. So, temperatures, humidity, space, the design of the exhibit, water flow, like there's a lot of things that come into it. So it is very challenging, even though the day-to-day things are a little bit easier than, say, picking up elephant poop. It's not quite as, physically demanding, but there's a lot of mental things you constantly have to pay attention to.
And this frog just looked away now, but he's been kind of eyeing down my dad the entire time.
He was very interested.
That's one of his little quirks.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of my frogs have their own little quirks and everything as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for time with the Panamanian golden frog and their
You're welcome.
Conservation, what you guys are doing here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my Instagram @ColeShirt. As always, I'll see you next week.